Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I spent last week in Israel. I went on a mission with AIPAC. AIPAC is a bipartisan organization, but they've been becoming more concerned that the left is leaving the tent. So this is the third summer that they have run a mission for rabbis who have more left-leaning tendencies to help them understand what role they can play in AIPAC. So I'm going to walk you through the itinerary because it was an absolutely fascinating trip. We met with so many individuals who spoke with integrity and had a deep love of Israel, and their stories totally contradicted one another. So I think you'll get a feel for it as I walk you through our itinerary. We started at the Knesset, and we sat with Merav Michaeli. She is a long-time lefty in Israel. She is part of the feminist leadership. She's fighting the Rabbanut, and it's sort of like this Estrada. She's encouraging women to not get married until the Rabbanut loosens its grip on the rules of marriage. And at the same table was Yehuda Glick, who is a relative newcomer to the Likud party. He sits to the right. He goes up on the Temple Mount to assert that Jews belong there. So you can see these are two quite different individuals, and yet the whole time they were disagreeing with each other in front of us. They were joking and laughing and calling each other a mensch and such a good person. So I don't know, you tell me. That filled me with hope. Then we had the opportunity the next day to go into the West Bank. Well, actually, we started at the Rachel border crossing at 5:30 in the morning. So this is the border crossing that is between Beit Lechem and Yerushalayim. And we met with the commander of the unit whose job it is to oversee this border crossing. And on the one hand, he is full of compassion for the people that he's helping across the border. Right now, it takes about 45 minutes to cross, and he's decided this is unacceptable, and he's trying to get their commute down to 20 minutes. So he's working hard with his unit to do it. At the same time, his job is to turn people away and say that they don't have the right permit or they've appeared on a security list and cannot come through. He has to hold both compassion and security in mind as he does his job. And we had this horrific but yet enlightening experience. There is a catwalk that goes over the station. And so we went up and we looked through the steel and the bars and the concrete at people coming through at a rapid pace trying to get to work on time. And we looked down and they looked up. And it's clear that the occupation is not good for either side, that there needs to be a solution found. Then we went back to the hotel to get ready to go to Ramallah, which was a first for me. You'll understand how complicated the West Bank is when I describe we had to get on a bus driven by an Arab company to go into Ramallah. And our Israeli security guard, by the way, there were 3 of them. Almost everywhere we went, they took our security very seriously. They could come with us on the bus until we got to the border crossing into Ramallah, at which point they had to get off, and the Palestinian Authority got onto the bus to guard us. Truly a first for me. Our first meeting was with Dr. Khalil Shikaki. He is the director of the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. And for the past 30 years or so, he has been asking his people the same questions through surveys to better understand the changing political climate of the Palestinian people. One of the most interesting things that he talked about is about 50% of the population wants an Islamist state in the West Bank, and about 50% of the Palestinians are pretty secular. And they say, I just want my civil rights. Let's have a one-state solution. And it was a very interesting question for me to contemplate. If I lived in Utopia land, and tomorrow there could be peace, but it meant giving up the Zionist dream of a sovereign state, but it also meant that there would be peaceful coexistence between Arab and Jews running their government together, would I do that? I don't know. I don't know. Then we departed for Rawabi. I had not heard of this town, but there is an interesting person who was born in Nazareth, and he was educated in the West. He's actually an American citizen, and he's tired of the Palestinian Authority not being able to pull its people up. So he is developing a town. It's about a third of the way complete. And his goal in developing this town is to give the Palestinian people something to be proud of. At the moment, he's created about 2,000 jobs. And by the time the city is fully operational, he will have created 10,000 jobs. It's also an incredibly gorgeous city. I would move to Rawabi if I could. It was beautiful, but it hasn't been without problems. The Israelis don't like it because he needs water and electricity and roads, and it's a very complicated place to build because in the West Bank there are 3 jurisdictions. Area A is completely under Palestinian authority, both security and governance. Area B is under Palestinian authority in terms of governance, but it's under Israeli authority in terms of security, and Area C is under Israeli security. So there are parts of this project that are in Area A, completely under Palestinian authority, and parts of the project that are in Area B. And so getting all of the paperwork done and figuring, well, which police force would you call if there was a problem is quite complicated there. And it gives a really good picture of how the West Bank is so entangled now, it will be very difficult to separate out into 2 states. The Palestinian Authority isn't crazy about Rawabi because it sees it as gilding the cage. And if you make the Palestinians too happy and comfortable under occupation, perhaps they will stop arguing for their independence. But he is a visionary, and whatever else can be said about him, he is helping people economically right now, which is something that is necessary for the Palestinian people. Then we went back to Ramallah to meet with Dr. Saeb Erekat. That name might be familiar to you from the newspapers. He was the chief negotiator for Yasser Arafat. And that encounter just reduced me to tears because I've read about him in the Israeli papers and I've read about him in the American papers, and he does not seem to be an ally for peace. And yet when you speak to him, he says, "My life is a failure. For 30 years, I've been trying to make peace between our people, and I can't get it to work, and I'm at the end of my rope." I don't know which narrative is true. We returned back to Jerusalem, got off of our Arab company bus, picked up our Israeli security guards, got into an armored bus, and drove all the way back into the West Bank to go to Efrat, which is a settlement, which is pretty much a suburb of Jerusalem. It's really not far. And there we met with Oded Ravivi, who's the mayor of Efrat. So on the one hand, there are times when water and electricity isn't working, and the town of Efrat helps its neighbors in the Palestinian villages to get those necessary services. And they're working on a kindergarten program in Arabic so that Jewish children will be able to speak Arabic to their neighbors and truly have conversations about important things. But on the other hand, Efrat is growing, and the mayor's job is to help find new land. And the only new land belongs to Arab neighbors. So his job is to go to court and fight to take land from Arabs. So is he a good person? Does he have good relations with his Arab neighbors? I don't know. It's very, very complex. The next morning, we departed for Tel Aviv. This was I think the fun part of the trip. So we stopped on the way in Beit Shemesh to meet an innovator. He has decided to save the kibbutz movement, which is reviving but still somewhat languishing, by growing medical cannabis. But it is a drug that there's growing understanding that this can be very beneficial for several diseases. You want some? It would be very helpful, and Israel has an ideal climate to grow the cannabis. So we were hearing about his entrepreneurial vision. And after I had posted this on Facebook, a good friend of ours from Israel said, just out of curiosity, what was the gentleman's name? I said, Saul K. She said, oh, that's my brother. No free samples, although there are plenty of jokes about it. Then we went to meet with Samir Achtamena. He's an Arab Israeli, so it's important to understand there are Arabs in the land of Israel who are Jewish. Their families come from Yemen and Morocco and Syria. There are Arabs in Israel who are Christian or Muslim and are citizens and live in Israel proper. And there are Arabs who live in Israel who are Palestinians. They are living under occupation. So we were meeting with an Arab Israeli who is a full citizen of Israel. And he has the co-director position at the Givat Haviva Institute. And one of the big projects they have are 6 schools called Hand in Hand, where Jewish children and Arab children learn together, and the school is bilingual in Hebrew and in Arabic. And he spoke about his experiences as a full tax-paying, law-abiding citizen who's married to a Jewish woman, and all of the prejudice that he meets with. It somewhat echoed the stories that we hear about blacks in this country. He is Muslim, and I didn't ask how they're raising the children, or what the wedding looked like, or how you get married in Israel if an Arab falls in love with, right? It's very complicated. Then we had lunch with 2 leaders of the LGBT community. We met with Imri Kalman of the Aguda and Alona Livni of Choshen. So the Aguda fights for policy rights, because on the one hand, Israel is a relatively good place to live if you're in the LGBT community. But on the other hand, you can't adopt a baby, because adoption goes through the rabbanut. And what they say is, you are a single parent, you're not desirable for adoption. They won't recognize, the 20-year marriage that's been between these people. So they're fighting that. It's also very hard to get divorced in Israel, because there's no precedent for it. There's no court for it. There's no ritual if you want a rabbi to help you exit your marriage in the holy way that you entered it. And then Choshen is an organization that does education primarily with youth, but also in schools. And they have really made progress in the last year. They are now going into Orthodox schools. And they're not permitted to talk to the students, but they are able to educate the teachers. So they see that as good progress. And we were there the day after a pride march in Beersheba. Yeah, so part of the focus of the LGBT movement in Israel right now is it's great in Jerusalem, it's great in Tel Aviv, but we need to be expanding the number of people who understand our community and who include our community. And the march did not go smoothly in Beersheba. There was violence. No one was badly injured, but it proves that they have a lot more work to do. So then we returned to Jerusalem for Shabbat, and I went to what's called the first station. They've taken the old train station where Derech Hebron and Beit Lechem meet, and it's now this beautiful outdoor mall with funky little stands and coffee shops. So every Friday in the summer, before Shabbat officially starts, they have musicians, local musicians, playing the songs of Kabbalat Shabbat, the traditional tefillah, but in a rocky kind of way. And the secular Israelis are there smoking their cigarettes and drinking espresso, and the modern Orthodox and Masorti Israelis are there singing the songs, and then one comes on that everyone loves, and they all dance together and sing. It was something I had never seen before, that kind of blending between the secular and religious Jewish worlds. It was beautiful. And when we got back late that night after going to Shabbat dinner, a friend said, would you like to come with me to the old wall? It was about 10:30 at night. And I said, well, I'll come with you into the old city, but I don't want to go to the wall right now. It's just such a yucky place. It's too political. I don't think I could pray there. And we walked down into the old city, and by the time we got there, it was 11. And it was so quiet that I surprised myself that the wall still meant something to me, and that I could see it as the place where people stood in the courtyard on Yom Kippur, waiting to see the red turn to white and know that they had been redeemed. And the place where Yochanan ben Zakkai snuck out of Jerusalem and begged with the Romans, "Give me Yavna and its sages," and saved Judaism and invented rabbinics. And I did. I prayed at the wall, which surprised the heck out of me. Saturday was a very peaceful Shabbat. I caught up with many friends that lived there, and I got to ask them about all these experiences I had. Many of them have shifted more to the right in the last 10 years. They've just lost too many friends and had too many difficulties. But that night was fascinating. Machane Yehuda, the shuk, the vegetable market, is now a hip scene at night. Yeah. So many of the stalls are owned by Mizrahi Jews of Arab descent, for a few generations. And the grandfather might sell cheese during the day, but the grandson at night, about 11 o'clock, opens it up, and it's a wine and cheese bar with local musicians. And they've taken the shutters that come down over each shop, and they've all painted it in a graffiti-like style, but it's these beautiful scenes of Israel or important moments in Jewish history. And it was amazing to see it revived, and it also made me feel very old. And I learned that a 38-year-old woman should not eat falafel at about midnight and keep drinking. The next day, we got a security briefing on our way up north with Colonel Chaim Moria, who wanted to help us understand Israel's missile defense system. It used to be that if the rockets were firing from the north, you could take your family into the south, or if the rockets were firing from the south, you could take your family to safety in the north. That is no longer true. Missile capability has greatly improved and is far-reaching. Probably the most sobering part of that visit was for him to explain, even if we fired with 95% accuracy, we don't have enough ability to keep our people safe. Yeah. We went up to the medical center of the Galilee. This medical center, by the way, is run by an Arab Christian who talked a little bit about the struggle it was to rise to that position in Israeli society. This medical center was the first of its kind to build a trauma center completely underground. So in the Second World War in Lebanon, they were operating fully the whole time as they were being shelled. And it's now the new model. All hospitals in Israel are starting to build underground trauma centers and wards so that they can keep taking care of patients during wartime. But what was really special is they treat Syrians. So the way it works is Syrians come up to the border, and they bring someone who has been injured by war, no questions asked, and they bring them to this medical center, they give them state-of-the-art treatment, and when they're well, they take them back across the border. We spent the night on the Kinneret in Tiberias. It was beautiful. The next morning, I forgot to tell you, we went up to the Lebanese border, and they said, you can't get out of the bus. There's been an incident. So a Russian drone had flown over from Syria to do surveillance and then had gone back over the borders. They just wanted, to keep us safe. But we looked across the border into Lebanon, and that's the place where a lot of missiles are stored by Hezbollah. Hezbollah is pretty much an arm of the Iranian government, and they play this little game with the UN, where the UN says, we'd like to come into your village in the south of Lebanon and look for missiles. And they say, okay, give us 48 hours. So here's the problem, as it was explained to us. In order to do a preemptive strike to get rid of the missiles, which we're now outgunned by, you would have to bomb mosques and schools and grocery stores. So that's not only an immoral thing to do, but it's against international law, and it would help us lose the PR battle with the world. I don't know what the Israelis will decide to do, but there is a war coming in the north. We were also on the Syrian border, but it's not really Syria anymore. Basically, every town has its own militia, and it's every person for himself. There's no allegiances change every day. ISIS is there, the Al-Aqsa Brigade is there, Hezbollah is there, Hamas is there. It's a mess. And there are people who really had to change their lifestyle. There are 4 Druze villages on the Golan Heights on the Israeli side. And it used to be, they would go to Damascus University for their degrees. They would bring their produce across the border and sell it with their families on the other, it's really not far. It's like from here to the, someplace in Plano. They've been completely cut off from their families. There's no porousness to the border anymore. Then we went to Beit Izzy Shapiro. We ended the tour on a very joyful note. Beit Izzy Shapiro is a leading center for inclusion of those with special needs. And we got to walk around the state-of-the-art center and meet some of the families. And there has been prejudice in Israel for people who are not like everyone else. So they had this great idea at Beit Izzy Shapiro. They created a playground, which was so enticing that both children with special needs and those without are on the playground. And it then becomes this laboratory to help them learn to get to know each other and understand each other. It was a really beautiful thing to see. So, is Israel in dire straits? Yes. Is Israel continuing to thrive and grow? Yes. Do I love Israel deeply? Yes. Did it improve my relationship with AIPAC? Absolutely. It helped me understand that if I don't want AIPAC to be only a Republican organization, then I have to become more involved. There isn't much lobbying to do of Democrats in Texas, but maybe one day there might be. And then it would be my role to help someone who is as offended as I am by the civil rights violations in Israel to understand the complexity of Israeli society, to understand the things that are positive about Israeli society, and to understand the immediate need to help provide dollars that lead to the defense system getting better in Israel. Let us pray for the state of Israel, page 416. Avinu Shebashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, Hagen Alea Bevrat Chasdecha, Ufros Alea Sukhat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha v'Amidcha l'Rashea, Sarea v'Yoatzea, V'taknen v'Itzah Tova milfanecha, Chazek et Yedei Meginei Eretz Kodshenu, V'hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'ateret Nitzachon Ta'atrem, V'natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Le'yoshveya, V'nomar, Amen.